Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth Newsom and welcome to my Booktube channel. Today I'm going to do my first Q&A, partially because it's been a year and I've yet to do a Q&A. So this will be the first one. Okay, to be perfectly honest with you guys, I'd forgotten I asked for Q&A questions at the end of one of my previous videos. So in response to one of my previous videos, a bunch of people posted like all of these random questions, and I'm like, oh my goodness, how am I going to have time to answer all these? Why are so many people asking me so many questions? And then by the time the third person commented and asked more questions, I'm like, oh, I asked for Q&A questions. And then I'm like, hey, I better start planning to do Q&A. So then I was actually worried I wouldn't have enough questions for a video, so I posted something on Instagram and then at the end of the YouTube video and Wattpad asking for questions, and I got tons of questions. And thank you guys so much for that, because my greatest fear with doing a Q&A and why I've held off doing it for so long is because I was worried that not a lot of people would ask questions and I just wouldn't have a lot of questions. Like I'd do a whole video and I'd answer maybe 1 or 3 questions max. Thankfully, I didn't have a really good reason to fear because now I have tons of questions, so many in fact that I had to take some out, which I was pretty bummed about because you guys asked so many good questions. So I try to answer one question at least from each of you, and if I don't have enough questions for the next Q&A, then I'll try to save your questions that you asked that I didn't get to answer in this Q&A. With that, let's get started on the first question. The first question is by Lithia Aarti, and she asked, who was/is the most influential person in your life? Okay, if I answered Jesus, would that kind of be a cop-out? Because he's shaped the whole way I live. Aside from that, there's my parents, because they've raised me and instilled a lot of good principles in me and just really encouraged me to pursue and follow my dreams. So I'd have to say those would be the top 3. Amxxxf asked, who inspired you to write TKCB? And a few people ask questions like this, like how I came up with a story idea for TKCB. Well, that's a funny question actually. So I wasn't intending to write this book. I was actually outlining another book, and I was asking readers for their opinions and letting them name characters. So I had this all in the works, and then I hit an inspirational roadblock, and I just wasn't sure what to do. So I did that thing where you like take your Bible and open to a random page and hope the answer is on that page. So at the top of my Bible, I'd written a little note, and it said, story idea. And I read it. I believe the chapter was something like Ezekiel 16 that I'd gotten it from. But essentially, it was an allegorical story, how the Israelites had prostituted themselves, and it portrayed God as a loving husband. But it was a pretty gory story, and eventually the prostitute wife who betrays her husband gets killed and raped and stuff. And then I was like, okay, God, do you really want me to write something like that? And then I just got this impression that it wasn't supposed to be necessarily that story. That story has already been written. But it was supposed to be a story of a Christian's walk to Christ. So that's essentially what The King's Cursed Bride is all about. It's a huge allegory about that, and that's how I got my inspiration for it. Ariel Masters asked, what started your love of writing? Well, the obvious answer would be reading. I've loved reading ever since I could read. And it just came really easily to me, and it was a way to transport myself into these other worlds and go on these journeys with characters that I loved. So a natural progression of that reading just seemed to be writing. Of course, there were a lot of other factors, but I'd say that's the main one. Kendra E, I'm not sure I'm saying that right, anyway, asked, who's your favorite author? One of my favorite authors, because I'm not sure I can say the favorite, but one of my favorite is Kendra E, just because her writing is amazing. Like a lot of Christian books are kind of crappy, especially in the romance department. They tend to be kind of cliche, and Kendra E is, like, the level of quality for her writing is just astounding, and her books captivate me. And just as another Christian writer, that's kind of what I'd aspire to be like. And then I've communicated with her a bit, and I got to meet her in person for the first time at a conference earlier this year. And she's as amazing of a person as she is a writer. Like, she's just all around incredible, and I adore her. So this is another question by Christian, who asked, how long have you been writing stories? I've been writing stories ever since I could write. Initially, sorry about the bird. He's kind of noisy. Some of you guys might remember him from earlier videos. So I started writing stories whenever I could, even though they were just one-page stories. My first novella-length stories I wrote when I was 10, and my first novel-length stories that I completed I wrote when I was 15. _HarleyB12 asks, question for Q&A. Congrats! What do you use for inspiration? So as far as generic story writing goes, the main thing I use for inspiration is other stories. And my brother's walking around back there. I would ask him to say hi, but I don't think he can hear me. Hey, David! You want to say hi? So the main thing I use for inspiration is actually other stories. Just because those stories make me ask what if, or I like to combine stories that I hear about. And one story I read about, Hades was the love interest, and the three fates had created this perfect girl for him that he thought was beautiful and that would be the perfect queen for the underworld. Like, wouldn't that be interesting if someone created the ideal wife or bride for another really powerful person? But what if the people who designed and trained this potential bride actually wanted her to lead to that person's downfall? So in other words, what if the bride designed for Hades was actually supposed to kill him in the end? So that's kind of a story idea that's been circling around my head. We'll see if anything comes of it. Silver-panther asks, what's your favorite animal? It used to be a jaguar because I thought jaguars were just really cool big cats and they could climb trees and stuff. Now I might change the answer to a kitten just because kittens are so freaking adorable. Dracos Girl4Life asks, what story has had the biggest impact on the way you write today? Ooh. There have been so many stories. I think one of the first stories that really sparked my love for fantasy romance would have to be the Chavis trilogy by Brian Litwin. The romance in it was just adorable, and I loved that series. Before that, there was another series called 7 Sons and 7 Daughters, and it was about this one girl who lives in this Arabic country in the past, and of course, it's a very strong patriarchy then, so she has to disguise herself as a man, and she starts her own business, and she falls in love with the prince. And the prince begins to suspect her true identity as a woman, so then she flees, and he pursues her. But it's really adorable, and I loved the girl's entrepreneurial spirit, and it just really inspired me. Bella-the-otaku asks, how are your reactions when you saw your books being popular and voted? So before The King's Cursed Bride, I had 250 followers. Now I think I have 25,000 followers, so that's about 100 times the amount, which is kind of crazy thinking about it. Honestly, I was shocked. So at first, growth was really slow, and then TKCB got selected to be a featured story, and the views shot up. And I was just absolutely delighted. I started TKCB thinking this would be a story I'd write for God, because he asked me to, and I didn't anticipate it being popular. In fact, I thought it'd cause my previous popularity to crash and burn, just because it was an allegory and so unlike the fantasy romance I'd written before. And then to my surprise, there are several people who really, really like it. So yeah, I was not expecting that. Anichka1404 asks several good questions. Her first question is, do you know how TKCB will end yet? And yes, I do know how it will end. Honestly, I started the story not knowing that, but I'm pretty sure I know it now, roughly. How old are you? I just turned 20 in November. Do you think anyone can write a book? Yes, absolutely. I don't think writing is some inherent talent that you're born with, which you can obviously tell if you've looked at some of my earlier stories, which are complete crap. Getting better at something is just a matter of putting time and commitment towards that goal. So if you put the time in, you can be a good writer, and that's all there is. What's the current word count for TKCB? That is an excellent question. I am not totally sure, so I'm actually going to look it up real quick. The current word count is 194,016 words. Yeah, it's like an epic fantasy at this point. It's ginormous. In fact, soon, before school starts, I'll probably have to start compressing some chapters together to make room for more chapters, since you can only post 200 chapters on Wattpad. Reddit Loved It asked, have you ever come across writer's block at one point during the making of your book? Oh my goodness. Yes. So I'm not sure if she means TKCB or any of my books. One of my books, Captured and Crowned, I hit a huge writing block with it. I'd just done my first rewrite of it, and I'd been to a conference, and I knew it needed another rewrite, but every time I thought about doing it, it was like dragging myself through mud or something, and it was just excruciating to try and rewrite it for a second time. And just so you guys know, I've rewritten that manuscript 3 complete times by now. So yes, I did end up rewriting it. But honestly, I had to take a break. I talked to my parents about it, and my dad's like, you've burned out on this, you just need to set it aside for a while. Which was totally the right thing to do, because with creative projects, you just need time to process them and think about them. And because I took the time to do that, I came up with some really good plot ideas and plot twists. And with TKCB, it feels like I always have a writer's block, honestly. It's such a hard story to write, because I know I'm not done with it. And pacing-wise, I know I'm not going to be done with it for probably at least 2 more months. At least. And just coming up with 2 chapters per week is actually kind of hard sometimes, because sometimes I just feel like I'm empty and I don't have anything left to write about for that story. But regardless of whether or not I feel inspired, I still write it, just because you guys are expecting that, and I really hate to disappoint readers. Brianne Faith Hill asks, where did you come up with the idea for TKCB? I kind of addressed that earlier with Ezekiel and all. xitzcourtneyxo asks, can we write a book together someday? Well, maybe. Honestly, I don't see me writing a collaboration with anyone at all in the foreseeable future, just because I think I'd kill them. I get so possessive of my story ideas, and if someone just is like, no, I kind of want to do the story this way, I'd be like, no, it's my story. So I can't even imagine how people can co-author a book. Kendra E. Ardnek asks, where do you want to see yourself in 10 years? So this is a bit audacious, but ideally as a New York Times bestselling author. Again, I know it's audacious, but I've worked it out. So it takes about 10,000 hours to achieve mastery, which is about 3 hours a day, and I've been writing since 10. I've been writing really consistently since 15. So I figure by the time I'm 30, it's reasonable to expect I'll be a bestselling author at that point. Again, I know that's kind of crazy, but I've worked it out, and I don't think it's too unreasonable. I guess we'll see in 10 years. Sam Kathryn asks, what are some of your favorite and least favorite Wattpad books? You're going to make me be mean, huh? As far as favorite books go, the season was pretty good. I think there are some that I liked more. The books by E. Latimer, like Frost, are really, really good. There's The Last She, which is a post-apocalyptic book that was, amazing. And now you're making me pull out my Wattpad app, because there are several really good ones. The Shadow Weaver was another really, really good one. And Betrothed to Jack Frost was just, adorable. The Bride of Alvar was really good. So was The Shadow Watch. The writing is so elegant for that one. Okay, as far as my least favorite goes, one of my least favorites. I feel so terrible about this because it's one of the ones I'm supposed to be reviewing. But it's called The Fight Club Academy. It was actually a Waddy's Award winner. And it's not completely bad or anything. There were just some things that I wasn't a huge fan of in it. And again, she might have been kind of an earlier writer when she wrote this. I don't really know. I just know that the writing didn't work for me. Sometimes it just kind of read awkwardly. And I don't think English is necessarily her first language, so I understand that. So even if a story writing isn't that great, a lot of times what usually saves a book for me is the romantic relationship. And that wasn't really the case with this. Just because the guy tend to be borderline abusive. One time, the girl's teasing him or, playing with his hair or something, annoying him. So he, grabs her and squeezes her tightly to the point where it hurts. And it's just, a little casual interaction between them. And I'm just no, that is not okay. I know some girls like reading romances where the guy's kind of domineering. And honestly, I think I might have liked those more too when I was younger, but as I've grown older, I like it when the guy's sweet and self-sacrificing and ultimately just an example of love, and I did not see that in the Fight Club Academy. With that said, it might have been just me and someone else might like it perfectly fine. Okay, so Susan Palmer asks several questions that I don't all have time for. One is, how do I get over my fear of publishing a book? So one of the best ways to do it is to tell people that you're going to do it, because when you start verbalizing it, you start to make that dream a reality, and the people around you kind of become accountability partners in a sense. So if you express your desire or your plans to start publishing your book, I think that would help. Another question she asked is, how do you feel when people ask you question after question? Well, if it's for a Q&A, I really appreciate it so that I don't run out of questions. And I really like talking about questions and things like that in person, just because really good questions can lead to really deep conversations. Online, tons of questions can kind of be a bit overwhelming for me, just because I don't always have time to answer everyone's questions. So I had several readers that roughly asked the same thing. Lonesome Red 27 asked, what inspired you to become a writer? Also, Captured and Crowned is literally my fave. Well, thank you. And Flyawaydanielle, Reyna-Reads, and Emily Riddle 1 also asked similar questions like, why did you start writing? I think what really inspired me was the fan fiction I wrote when I was 15. So it was a Jelsa fan fiction. It was my first completed work. My readers and reviewers were just so encouraging, and I was just really fueled and motivated by those comments. And it occurred to me like, hey, people love reading what I write, and I love writing it, so why not consider this as a career? And since then, I've been doing my best to try and be an author full-time after I'm done with college, but we'll see how that works. What made you so small and angry? By Man.withthe.plan. You know, I just had a feeling a question like this would come up. I knew that like one of my friends or family members would ask something like that. And in this case, Man.withthe.plan is my younger brother. So I don't know what made me so small and angry. Probably having a really freakishly tall younger brother. Because first of all, since he's crazy tall, he must have stolen all the tallness genes, which is why I'm short. He's like 6'1", and he's 16, and I'm 5'4". As far as why I'm so angry, that's also probably just like post-traumatic stress disorder from being an older sister to a younger brother like that, you know? I love you, Daniel. What has been the biggest inspiration for you as an author? By sdhowardauthor. I've talked about some variations of this question, but something else that's inspired me, and this is really terrible, is reading crappy published books. It's like, if they can write a book like that and get published, then I could probably write a better book and get published. So probably not the most optimistic, kind, positive thought, but crappy published books do inspire me. And they also motivate me to try and write a better book than that. So the next question is by Caroline Alice Kruger. Would you rather be able to read any book in the world but have the last chapter missing, or only be able to read nonfiction books for the rest of your life? Caroline, you are a terrible person. What kind of a question is that? I don't mind nonfiction, but like only reading nonfiction? Honestly, I think I'd go with the first option. It would kill me because I love a good, happy, romantic ending. But at the same time, I live and breathe fiction. It's like my addiction. So I don't think I could give fiction up. Aw, starrynightreads asked a question. So in case you guys don't know, starrynightreads is Warren. He's one of my Booktube buddies. And I'll also put his channel down below so you can check him out if you want to. He reads a lot of interesting YA books, especially sci-fi. And he's gotten me obsessed with the Illuminae files. So Warren asked, do you plan to publish your current WIP? Or work in progress for those who don't know the abbreviation. Okay, it depends what work in progress you're talking about, because I'm working through two. One of them is a story I'm editing, and I actually do plan to publish that June 2019. The other is The King's Cursed Bride, which I'm currently writing on Wattpad, and I have no idea. So many people have told me I should publish it, but I don't want to charge people for it just because of the nature of that story. It's something I want to give people freely, and also the lazy part of me knows that editing a book that's that big, over 200,000 words, is going to be insane. And I would not want to publish it and have it in print unless it's been edited. So, yes and no. Keturah Lamb asks, what's your favorite social media platform? Wattpad, because I can post stories. So if I had to choose something aside from Wattpad, I'd probably choose YouTube and Instagram. Shelley Littleton asked, how did you know you wanted to become a novelist? And she added a little heart at the end. That's so sweet. So as I said earlier, the biggest thing was probably writing that fan fiction and just realizing, shh, baby. As mentioned earlier, As mentioned earlier, as I said earlier, it was probably that fan fiction and just realizing that other people wanted to read what I write and I really liked writing. I'm sorry about the bird. He's just very talkative. Jessie L. Roberts asks, what tips do you have for gaining readers on Wattpad other than posting regularly? So posting regularly is my number one tip. And then there are some obvious ones like making sure you have a good cover, captivating title, blurb, and then the first chapter has to be really interesting. And cleaning up typos helps. But as far as strategy specifically for Wattpad goes, I'd recommend shorter chapters. Just because most people are reading Wattpad books off of their phones. And shorter chapters just work best for that kind of format. In addition, shorter chapters are easier to write, and then you get a vote or a view per chapter, so it makes your votes and your views go up really quickly. rhood20 asks, do you feel people take you less seriously because you publish on Wattpad? Ooh. Honestly, I would say no. Like, maybe there are people who would think less of me for that. But most people I've met seem to be pretty interested, especially once they know that I have a good following. And if anything, I think it makes people interested and it earns a certain degree of respect. Jebraun Clifford asks, what are your best tips for world domination or establishing your platform? They're pretty much the same thing, really. Establishing your platform is something I really struggled with. I went to my first writing conference when I was 16, and there were all these people talking about building your online audience and your platform and social media. And it's like, what the heck? I'm a writer. I don't do this stuff. I had no idea that this whole other marketing world existed for writers. And ever since then, I've worked really hard on building a platform. I've tried out lots of different things. I used to do short book reviews on social media. And then for a while, I maintained a blog. I was on a group blog. So of course, the number one tip for anything is consistency and posting regularly, whatever platform you choose. My number two tip is make sure it's a platform you like. Because if you don't like it, you're not going to be motivated to use it, and it's unlikely you'll post consistently. And even if you do post consistently, if you don't get a huge fan base immediately, you're going to be upset because you just have to enjoy whatever you do purely because of that thing, even if you don't get a good fan following. For the first year or so, nothing's going to happen. And if you force yourself to post on something consistently that you don't love, it'll feel like you're dying on the inside. I know because I tried to do a blog for 1 year, and overall I had like 32 subscribers. Most of them were friends and family, which I really appreciated. But yeah, just choose a platform you love because you're not going to see any growth for a while, and you need to have something you like to do just because you're doing it, not because it gets you a ton of followers. Man, so those are most of the questions, I think. Thank you guys so much for asking them. Like, again, I was just so scared that I wouldn't have enough Q&A questions for like a whole video. And unedited, this video just ran past 38 minutes. So I'll have a lot of editing to do. And thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe because I post one bookish video a week. And with that, I'll see you next time. Bye!